This is the Epic Brum podcast, and we're joined by a creative who's been capturing the city's skyline with his unique style of art. In this episode, we're chatting to Alex Edwards, the Birmingham artist who goes by the name of Brumhaus. His work is inspired by modernism, architecture and design and has resulted in some fantastic interpretations of Birmingham's skyline. Alex, welcome to the Epic Brum podcast. It's nice to talk to you. How are you?
I'm good. Hello, Dan. How are you?
Yeah, really good. And say nice to talk to you because at the time of recording, I believe you've just gone on display at the Bullring, haven't you?
Yeah, well, for part of the Birmingham Design Festival, which was in August, I was approached to do a poster along with a lot of other creatives in Birmingham, and that was exhibited in Custard Factory. Now it's moved into the Bullring, and it's plastered all over the Debenhams end of the Bullring now. So it's quite a great showcase for local artists and creators and illustrators.
It's an absolute giant of a creation as well, isn't it? I've seen you sent me a picture of yourself, and I think I've seen it on Instagram as well. Of you kind of stood in front of it, and it kind of, I mean, I don't know how tall you are, but it absolutely dwarfs you anyway. So,
well, I'm 6 foot tall, so yeah, it's huge. You don't really appreciate the height of these shop fronts in the Bullring, but it must be 10 foot or something. So I'm very flattered that it's one of the bigger ones, and I think it works really well at that size as well. The image, so it's very. The brief was to be really colourful, and it was quite a loose brief about the topic. So it's kind of a montage of different Birmingham buildings, which is kind of what I do anyway. Really, that's my theme.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, because you've got a very distinguishable style that people who know your work, I think they would recognise it straight away if they saw one of your pieces. But for those who are less familiar, do you want to start by kind of telling us about your style and what is the Brumhaus style really?
Yeah, absolutely. So Brumhaus, the name Brumhaus, first of all, I'll talk about that. So I'm influenced by design and graphics and modernist art, and Bauhaus was a design school in the 1920s and 30s. So Brumhaus was kind of just a reflection of me doing pictures of Birmingham and just created a little pun out of the name, really. So Brumhaus was from Bauhaus. And what I actually do is I just create art prints of Birmingham. So predominantly Birmingham. I do a few other places, but they are graphic prints which I sketch and then create digitally and then, output them as prints. So that's essentially what I do.
So it's essentially a mix of sketches and graphic design.
Yeah, so as part of my process, I'll draw a pencil sketch and then I'll redraw it digitally, because I was a graphic designer for 25 years, and I've kind of learned how to use graphic software as a way of drawing. So it's kind of very straight lines, vectors, if you know what they are. The kind of thing an architect would draw with. It's very straight lines. And then the benefit of doing it like that means I can output it at different sizes, like, the one at the Bullring we've discussed. It doesn't lose quality, so it's very sharp, and it's like a flexible way of working. So I'll draw it as a sketch, redraw it digitally, and then kind of go back and redraw bits until I'm happy with it. So
it's fair to say it's quite technical.
Yeah, it is really, I suppose. I've just kind of worked out how to do it just because I was good at Adobe software, really. And that's kind of why my artwork looks a bit different, I think. The process isn't really like anything anybody else would do. I mean, it takes ages to... So if anyone was going to try and copy me, they'd probably, they're probably wasting their time because it would take forever.
They'd give up, lose the will, probably. Yeah.
Yeah, but the benefit for me is that I can do that. I've learned that process. So, if I start off with the sketch and then put it through the usual processes, that's essentially shapes how it looks.
Sure. You talked about the name. I was going to ask you about that, but you've explained it brilliantly already for those who kind of don't know their art. But you did go under another name, didn't you, before that? Was it Under?
Yes.
Undertype?
You've done your research there.
I did. Well, you got to, yeah.
Yeah, well, I can explain that. So I worked for a signage company for 20 years, and I was drawing wayfinding signage and graphics for particular environments. Sometimes I'd do a logo with a bit of text, and I would doodle as well at lunchtime. So I'd kind of had another creative outlet where I'd doodle. And then because I was good at working with images, I found out about this website called Redbubble, who I still use today, actually, for some merchandise, where you can just upload an image and they put it on all the products for you. It's a good place to start for, somebody you can work with things like Photoshop. You can just upload it and then they do all the dirty work, if you like.
Yeah, like mugs, T-shirts and all that sort of stuff, yeah.
Yeah, you can put it on T-shirts. It's good quality. You can do prints. So I thought, I'll do that then. So I started putting my doodles on there. And they weren't really selling or anything. It's just like a hobby, just to learn how to do it, really. And then I came up with the name Undertype. I think my first name's Alexander, so it's Ander, and then type, because I was interested in typography. Then I found out it was Dutch for another type. So I thought, well, that's kind of a nice name, really. And then once I'd figured out how to do that, that kind of gave me the basis, because I created another piece of work on a Post-it note at lunchtime of Birmingham Central Library, if you remember that place.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Did you ever go in there much?
Yeah, well, and kind of walk through plenty of times, back through sort of Paradise Forum to get to, the arena or wherever, so, yeah.
Yeah. So were you a lover or a hater?
I was going to come on to this, actually, about the sort of the brutalist stuff. So, but, carry on telling us about this is kind of your sort of change in direction, really, isn't it? I guess.
Yeah. The change in direction was basically because I was working on wayfinding and graphics for buildings. So I thought, well, I'll turn my eye to buildings instead of these kind of pointless doodles. Really, it's what they were. Just like blobs and things. So I put a bit more structure into it, and I thought, well, yeah, I like this building. The company I worked for changed premises, and so I was on the commute walking through Central Library every day, looking up and admiring all the big buildings, something I hadn't really looked at since I was a teenager, when I used to go into Birmingham on the number 9 and have a look around the rag market. And before you knew how to, before Google and everything, you just have to wander around and work out where everything was, wouldn't you?
Yeah, sure.
So Central Library was the kind of catalyst, because once I bought a printout of that, people who liked the building and wanted to keep it saw it and thought, yeah, this is great, let's celebrate this building. But it was already, on the list of places to be demolished.
Yeah, the reason I kind of stalled when you said there, are you a lover or a hater? My day job, I work in one of the last remaining brutalist buildings, the Chamber of Commerce house, just past Five Ways. Yeah, and it's amazing the contention it causes among people. There are some real connoisseurs who love brutalist architecture, and then there are those who are like, come on, this isn't fit for purpose in the 21st century, And in case my bosses hear this, actually, I'll kind of refrain on saying what I really think, but I think the architecture is great, but you could ask me again in a cold day in December when you're trying to keep warm in the office, and my answer might be slightly different. But it sounds like you're very much a fan of the brutalist architecture.
Yeah, brutalist and modernist architecture. That's kind of, and it's all clean lines. And I think where that kind of architecture falls down is that it's not always maintained and cleaned. And I think certainly with Central Library, it did seem to look a bit tired. Interesting fact, it was originally supposed to be covered in white marble.
Yes, I did hear this. And
they ran out of money.
Yeah.
But I mean, I do still love that building, even though it's a ghost now. And there were some great ideas to keep it. What's there now, the Chamberlain Square, it's pretty and it's clean. And, if you moved in there, you'd be nice and warm, Dan. So,
yeah. I mean, the one I was sad to see, I don't think it's gone, but it's not the operating as it was, is the old Post and Mail building. I think that was in Cornwall Circus. I think that's a made in as well. And
yeah,
as a
few around.
But I mean, obviously they're the Post and Mail are long gone from there. But I mean, as somebody who trained as a journalist and grew up in the media, really, in terms of my career, did work experience there too. That's a real iconic building. So I was kind of very sad when they moved out of there.
Yeah. There's a few. There's the classic that most Brummies love, even if you're not a huge fan of brutalism, I suppose, is Signal Box. Just the one on New Street.
Yeah, that's one of your signature pieces, isn't it? The Signal Box, I noticed.
Yeah, it's a bit weird looking, really. It's got this kind of concertina cladding in concrete, and it's one of those buildings. I get the same feelings from that when I look at that as I do BT Tower. You kind of look at it in wonder. You don't really quite know how it works, what's going on in there, and its function is kind of worn by how it looks. There's a weird doorway near the top, and there's some funny ladders on it. It's just a strange building, really.
Yeah, the BT Tower one comparison's interesting because also it seems like an obvious thing to say, but you always know where you are in the city, don't you? Whereby kind of when there's certain points like that you know exactly where you are in the city when you can sort of spot those. So
yeah, it's still Birmingham's tallest bit structure, I think. I looked all these up the other day because you've got 103 Cornwall Road now, and I don't know whether to love that building or not yet because I've got to update a few pictures because it's so big. It's not in 1 or 2. So the most recent picture I've done, I've put it in because it will be, it is part of the skyline now.
Well, I was just going to ask you this actually because you must be finding you certainly over the period of kind of 5 years since all this redevelopment started and where it's kind of still carrying on, you're going to find yourself having to do quite a few updates, aren't you? Because the Birmingham sort of landscape's forever changing.
It is, yeah. I was thinking about this yesterday because I was trying to work out whether it's a good thing or a bad thing because it's pushing me to do new work, certainly, and it's making me think, well, I'm not really going to get tired of doing Birmingham then, am I? I mean, I've called it Brumhaus anyway, so if I started doing Newcastle, people would be like, why is it called Brumhaus?
Yeah.
But I think it's a case of just keep doing new interesting pictures, and then people will associate with all the new buildings, and you'll have that. I think that's what people get with my pictures. They look at it and they think, oh, I used to work there, or my dad took me to a shop on that road when I was a kid. So you've got nostalgia and you've got pride because people love the city as well.
Yeah, I think that mix of the old and the new is what's great at the moment. I mean, you mentioned Centenary Square, and when we had Casey Bailey on here, he said his favourite thing about the city is the sort of marriage of the old and the new. And you walk through that area and you've got the plush new Centenary Square, but you've got the museum and the town hall and that marriage of old and new. I mean, it probably does look a bit strange to some people, but if you can kind of see the some people will see a real beauty in that sort of marriage, won't they?
Yeah, that's what makes it distinctive, because it is varied. And, Selfridges, when they built that was a bit Marmite. You got to love it now, though. It's firmly rooted in, the skyline. You've got Grand Central is like a spaceship that's landed. And I've got plans to do some prints on that as well. I've always got loads of ideas for places, because there's not really a shortage. There's different viewpoints of everywhere, really.
Yeah, I mean, and in 20 years' time, if you haven't got bored yet, you could be talking about, I don't know, Curzon Street or something like that when that opens, and there's so much in the pipeline, and you just never know what it's going to look like and how it's going to change, do you? So
yeah, I'd love to still be doing it in 20 years. That's the plan. If I was just doing the same thing in 20 years, I think I'd be happy. But things evolve, and different projects come up. So we'll see where it goes. But I love doing what I do, and I'm really grateful that people think it's good enough to put in their house and look at every day.
Yeah, sure. I mean, what have been your most popular pieces among kind of fans and customers, etc.?
The best, well, the biggest seller, I suppose, is the University of Birmingham print, because there's that many people that love the uni. It's a beautiful campus with all the red brick. You got Old Joe, that's the red building, and there's some new bits as well. So that's got kind of a lot of love from alumni, people that work there buy it as well. Not everybody would want a picture of where they work at home, would they? But I think some of them do. So yeah, that's a popular one. I think if I look back, the pictures that really kind of changed things for me, there was obviously the Central Library we talked about. That was a big one. And then I think I did a cityscape that was quite popular, Brum Cityscape. And then the biggest one really that made me think, I can actually make a living out of this, was From Digworth with Love, which is like an orange and blue colour palette. It's a square print looking from Digworth High Street all the way up towards the city centre. And that view's kind of mostly unchanged still. That was about 4 or 5 years ago, I think. So that one really was a game changer as well.
Have there been any that have taken you by surprise and you've gone, wow, I didn't expect this one to be so popular, or I didn't know there was so much love for this part of Birmingham that I've sketched?
I'm not sure. I think everybody loves the cityscapes, and I get requests to do a lot of things like Bourneville and suburbs and things. I've done a few suburbs, but the cityscapes are the ones people love. Everybody from Birmingham will have been into town, and you look at it from different viewpoints, don't you, as well? So I think if I do all the different sides, the ways you come into town, that will catch people's eye, and they'll love that particular picture. But it's pretty spread, really. When I look at what I sell, people like, all of them, really. Apart from the uni one, it's pretty spread.
Okay. I mean, it's interesting. You mentioned the suburbs that you'd done, because I think you've done Harborne and Moseley and Kings Heath. But, I mean, like you, I'm a Sutton Coldfield resident, and I'm obviously very proud of having Sutton Park on my doorstep.
Yeah.
And you've done the park, haven't you? And that's the reason that one's so interesting is because it's so different, because it's not really about buildings as such, is it?
Yeah, it was a tricky one, really. It took me, from start to finish, it was over a few months, probably 4 or 5 months that I completed that. And yeah, like you say, I'm normally looking at buildings and straight lines. This one was a complete shift, because it's all trees and pathways and medieval, what do they call it, ancient woodland. So it was quite tricky, but it ended up being quite a complex picture. best kind of viewed big, really. But it works well, and that's been a popular one that came out last year.
But it is a jewel in the crown, though, isn't it? Sutton Park, really, of Birmingham and Sutton Coldfield. So I'm not surprised it was popular, really.
I'm just in Boldmere, so I'm by Boldmere Gate, and it's especially during lockdown. It's just, COVID times when you couldn't really go many places. It was a joy, really, to have it there. So
yeah, I'd second that. Absolutely, a massive kind of release, a massive saviour for a lot of us, really. But we've talked time and time again with different people about how strong Birmingham's creative scene is right now, and that covers a lot of different areas of creativity. But it feels like art and design in particular are really smashing it at the moment, aren't they? That particular sector. Yeah. And I mean, I know you mentioned the guys at the design festival before and what they've done and the platform they've given everybody.
Yeah, that was a real eye opener, because you've got an abundance of talent, really, more than you'd think. It's amazing. It's not just art either. It's film and theatre and food, music. It's a lot of things, but with art, there's no two kind of artists the same as well. It's very varied, diverse work that everyone's doing. If I'm at an art market and I'm next to another person selling pictures, it's fine, because people like one thing and the other. So there's a bit for everyone, really.
Yeah, and the Design Fest has really captured the imagination, hasn't it? We know Dan and Luke quite well, and from where they started it a few years ago, it's become this real great showcase. It's also bringing people in as well, isn't it, to look at Birmingham artists from the outside?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like you said, it's bringing people in, and it's showing off what we can do, really. We need podcasts and Central News and things like that, and people like you, just to shout out about these things, really, because it's all there. It's just needs a spotlight on it, and then everyone will see it, get everyone to come and have a look, of what's going on here, because there's so much going on.
Yeah, well, we're trying our best to do just that. Are there any of the creatives in the city or artists as such whose work you're a really big fan of?
Have you heard of Cold War Steve?
I've heard the name. I've seen him on social media, yeah.
Yeah, you want to have a look on Twitter, because it's quite political work. But, it's very funny. It's done with a bit of humour. A lot of Brummies are known for our humour, aren't we? And there's a guy called Tap Vision as well, who's hilarious. He does stuff on Instagram and live performances. He's one to watch. There's a lot of artists as well. There's a guy called Fokker Wolf.
Yeah, it was the Pat Butcher mural, wasn't it? Yeah.
So he does a few things, but the Pat Butcher thing was a fly poster. It was a picture of Pat Butcher from EastEnders that he just popped up. So they're just funny images. Somebody defaced it, and then he put Mike Reed's face over the top. Yeah. It's a nice touch.
That was one of the strangest things of lockdown, just having a wander around Digbeth one day, and there was nothing open, and that had just randomly appeared, and I was a bit aggrieved at the time, actually, because I think they replaced Tommy Shelby. They replaced Tommy Shelby with Pat Butcher, and I was thinking, hang on a second, because I'm a big Peaky Blinders fan. I was thinking, hang on, what's this all about? But then the more I thought about it, I was like, that is actually really funny. So
yeah.
Going back to you were talking about your most popular works and stuff, and your orders, and people wanting to buy pictures of the uni because they're former students or they work there, and I think that's something else that's really struck us lately, and we've spoken to a lot of people about that. There seems to be a real demand for Brum-inspired art and merchandise and clothes, and it's a bit of a step change in that kind of pride that people are showing in the city, because people want a Yes Bab t-shirt, and they want a Brumhaus front and centre of their office or their home, or they want some prints from Provide or Rotunda Industries or something, and that that appetite for it just seems to be huge at the moment.
Yeah, there's a lot of local pride, and I think that's what it's reflecting, really. You know, like yes, Bab and all right, Bab, and all these kind of phrases that you see on the merchandise. And, you know, people love buying pictures of Birmingham. There's a few other people that do similar things as well to me, and different styles. So there's a lot out there, and, you know, it's popular because people have got an idea about loving their city, and that's what it's reflecting.
Yeah, because the reason I mentioned it, that hasn't always been the case, has it? It's a bit like, I don't know, Brummies always like to take the mick out of themselves a bit, and perhaps don't. While they are proud of being from their city and they are proud of their city, they haven't always liked to show it off. But that has changed in the ways that we've kind of just talked about. Yeah,
well, I'm 47 now, so I remember the old Brum, showing my age. But it has changed tremendously since then, and you might find people with that negative attitude are a bit older, and because it's every 30 years, Birmingham completely regenerates and turns into something else. And what it is now is actually amazing. It's a beautiful place, good enough to draw, obviously, and there's that much going on, and the impression of Birmingham to Brummies is that it's brilliant, but I suppose the rest of the country's got to catch up with that. They're a little bit behind.
Yeah, I think we're getting there, but you're right, there's still some way to go. But what's next for Brumhaus then? Because you've covered a hell of a lot of Birmingham and the surrounding areas, and there's still plenty more to do as it develops, and you've done a few other bits around the West Midlands, and I think you started, and there's one piece of London inspired work in there too, isn't there? So what's the plan? Is it to branch out and start doing a few bits in other places, or are you very much focused on Brum at the moment, or have you got some other things in mind? Or
I'm pretty focused on Brum right now. I've got about, as I sit here in my little office, I've got about 100 post-it notes stuck around the room, and when I decide on a picture, I'll do it kind of last minute. I've got ideas in my head, and I'll think about them on and off over the weeks, based on what sketches I've done. And then when I actually feel like I want to do another picture, when I'm ready, I'll just kind of launch myself into it. So at the moment, the ones in my head, maybe one of the Mac at Cannon Hill Park, because I'm going to be back there at markets and things like that. Grand Central is definitely one I'm going to do. I was thinking of maybe doing a triptych of 3 pictures of that. And also, it may not be a massive seller. Have you ever heard of a Birmingham Roller?
I haven't. I should have done, to my shame.
Well, you can Google it after, but it's basically a particular breed of pigeon. Bear with me. It's a particular breed of pigeon called the Birmingham Roller. It flies to a very high height, and then it passes out and falls, and it has this kind of rolling, tumbling action. Then it regains consciousness. And this is a Brummie referenced bird. So I've done a little sketch of that. So that might be like a little free postcard or a mini print that I bring out.
Oh, wow. Well, there you go. You learn something every day. The Birmingham Roller, I'm going to check that out as soon as we finish recording this. That's a great little fact. And I believe you're in a book that's soon to be published as well.
Yeah. It's called the Birmingham Art Book. I was asked if I wanted to contribute towards a book which is celebrating places in Birmingham, celebrating Birmingham. So there's it's like a coffee table book. There's 58 artists altogether who've contributed towards it, and I'm one of those people. Luckily, I made the cut, and that should be coming out early next year.
Well, thanks very much for taking the time out to do this. As we talked about before we started, it is the time of recording. We are right in the run up to Christmas, and for somebody anybody who sells anything really, it's a really busy period. So I know you've got a lot going on, but we just wanted to finish off by asking how we finish with all our guests really. What makes Birmingham epic?
Birmingham is thriving at the moment and it excels at everything. And that could be food, art, theatre, design, dance, photography. And we're a city of makers and creators, and we do this all with a friendly smile. And it's just a great place to live, and the people are the best, and they're funny, and the skyline is fantastic.
What a fantastic answer to finish on. Alex, thank you very much. It's been great to chat to you, and we look forward to seeing some more of your work coming up very soon. Thank you so much, and thank you for having me on. It's been an honour. Cheers. Thanks for listening to the Epic Brum podcast. You can find more episodes on all the major podcast apps such as Apple and Spotify. And don't forget to follow us on social media at Epic Brum HQ.